Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lecture, we'll pick up from where we left off last time and begin looking at how we can enter and format data inside of Excel. Okay, and here we are now back inside of Excel. So let's imagine a scenario where we've been asked to create a payroll spreadsheet so that managers can easily monitor and calculate spending on staff wages. To do this, we'll need a few key pieces of information. First, our employee names, their salary, their hours worked, and also the tax rate. Let's start by entering some names for our employees inside of our spreadsheet. First, we'll need to select a cell, and we'll start with our first cell in the spreadsheet, which is cell A1. So we can go over here and then just click to select this cell, and now we can begin typing. And our first employee is called Jane Smith. So we can go ahead here and enter her first name. So now we've entered our first name for our employee. We could add their full name into this column, but I'll put their last name into the next column, which will be column B. To move over to the next column, we can either click cell B1, or alternatively, with cell A1 selected, we can press Tab on our keyboard, and that will move us over to the right by one column. We could also press Shift and Tab, and that will move us to the left by one column. So in column B, I'll now enter their last name, which is Smith. So we've now added our first employee's name, Jane Smith, into our spreadsheet. Let's now add a few more. I'll now press Enter, and that will take us to the next row. So as you can see, we now have cell A2 selected. And this employee's name will be James Crossford. So here in the first name column, I'll enter James. And now let's enter their second name. So again, by pressing Tab, and that will shift us over by one column to the right, and then we can enter their second name, which is Crossford. And now that we've added our first two employees, and we can see what the process is, I'll go through and I'll repeat this process so that we have a few more employees to work with. Okay, so I've gone ahead and added a few more employees to our spreadsheet. If you like, you can either use these names, or you could also come up with your own. Alternatively, within the course material for this section, you'll find the finished workbook so you can copy and paste them into your own workbook. And just to quickly show you, the workbook can be found here within this folder. Going back to our workbook, you'll probably notice that some of our employee names now no longer fit within the cells. This is because the cell content, so in this case here we can see Crossford, is too large to fit within the column width. There are a number of ways in which we can go about fixing this. First, we can simply select the column, and if you hover here in between the two columns, you can see we have a little arrow that comes up. You can go ahead and click and drag to resize the column. Alternatively, we can double click on the arrow that comes up rather than clicking and dragging, and that will automatically resize the column to the required width for us, as you can see here. As another alternative, if we navigate to the top left of our workbook, you will find a small little triangle. And if you click on this, this will select all the columns, rows, and cells within our workbook. And then if we double click again on the little arrow between two columns, that will resize all of them for us. Now that we've added our employee names and resized all of our columns, we should add in how many hours each employee has worked. And to do this, we can repeat the same process that we followed to add in the employee names. So let's go to cell C1 and then add in each employee's weekly hours. And now our final column to add is the hourly pay for each employee. So let's go ahead and move over to column D1, and then we'll add in our hourly wages. The next thing we'll need to do is add in some column headings. This is so that other people will understand what each column represents. We'll start by selecting row 1, and then right-clicking and hitting on the Insert button. Something to note here is that when you insert a new row, the inserted row will always be inserted above the selected row. So if, for instance, we had selected row 3 here, for instance, with Megan Young, the new row would be inserted above Megan Young and below James Crossford, as we can see here. So now that we've added our new row to the top of our spreadsheet, all we have to do is select the new rows and then add in the required column headings. So we have our first name, our last name, the hours worked, and the hourly pay. And now, as a little example, let's say we have a new employee that's just joined the company. We could, of course, add this employee to the end of our spreadsheet, but for the sake of demonstration, let's add it to the middle. So we'll select a new row in the middle of our dataset. So our new employee is called Brian Croft. Some of you may have noticed here, we now have a duplicate employee name within our spreadsheet. So if we were using the employee's name to uniquely identify them, then this will no longer work as we have two employees with the same first and last name. To fix this, we'll add in what is called an employee ID column to our dataset. And this will simply be a number that uniquely identifies each employee. We'll go into more detail on ID columns and primary keys in our section on SQL towards the end of the course, but for now, just know that they can help us to uniquely identify a particular row or variable in a dataset. We'll now add a new employee ID column. So inserting a new column is very similar to inserting a new row. We'll have to first select our column. So here we'll select column A, we'll hit right click and insert. And again, when you insert a new column, the inserted column will always be to the left of the selected column. Now we'll add in our column heading, which is the employee ID. And then now within this column, we'll add in our numeric identifier. So this will just be a number going from 1 to the number of employees that we have. So we can start here by entering 1 and 2, and then we could go on and add each of these numbers in manually for all of our employees, which for a small data set like this may not be too bad. But in a larger data set with potentially millions of rows, this can be quite a time-consuming process. Thankfully, Excel has a feature called autofill that allows us to automatically enter data based on repeating patterns. So in our case here, we're putting a number in a cell that is simply one more than the cell above. If we select 1 and 2, we'll find a little box here in the bottom right-hand corner. Now we can either double-click, and that will fill down to the last row, or alternatively, we could click and drag up to a specified point. And then to finish off, we'll apply some basic data formatting to our column headings, just to add a little bit of visual hierarchy, so they stand out from the rest of the values. Typically, column headings are made bold and have central alignment. Let's start here by selecting our column headings. We could either left-click and drag. We could select our first cell here and shift plus left-click on the last cell, and that will select the range in between. Or, alternatively, with the first cell selected, we can hit Control, Shift, and right arrow, and that will select every cell with data present to the right of the currently selected cell. From here, we'll navigate to our Home tab, which I already have selected, and then on our Home ribbon, we have the Font and Alignment groups. And these are the two main groups where you can find our basic data formatting commands and buttons. As mentioned before, column headings are typically formatted to be in bold and have a central alignment. You could, of course, do more here, but this is usually considered to be standard. So to make our text bold, here we have our bold button, or alternatively we have the shortcut, which is Ctrl plus B. And then we have the option to centrally align our text over here from within the alignment group. Additionally, we can also change the font size and apply other formatting options like italics and underline from over within the font group too. Another helpful formatting tool available within Excel and other Microsoft products is the Format Painter. And this can be used to apply the formatting on one cell to a different cell. So if you go ahead here and select one of our column headings, you can click the Format Painter and apply the same formatting to a different cell in our spreadsheet. But I'll just go ahead here and undo that by clicking on the Undo button in the top left-hand corner. And with that, we've finished our lecture here on the basics of Excel. So quickly recap, we've taken our blank spreadsheet and entered in our base data, which in this case was our employee names, the hours worked, and hourly pay. Then also, we have added in and applied some basic formatting to our column headings. In the next lecture, we'll take our current spreadsheet and add to it by including some formulas and functions to automatically calculate key numbers like the gross pay, tax contribution, and more for each of our employees. So I'll see you in the next lecture.